the DNC will soon be voting on whether or not they will reduce the influence superdelegates have on presidential nominations. Now, even though they should be eliminating superdelegates altogether, well, there were still a number of DNC members that are outraged at the prospect of them even taking a step in the right direction. And as a result, some DNC members are now staging a revolt against this plan. Now, as David Siders of Politico reports, a band of Democratic National Committee superdelegates is staging a revolt against a Bernie Sanders-endorsed plan to reduce their influence in the presidential nominating process, mounting a long-shot bid to block the measure when the DNC meets in Chicago next month. "If we don't have a vote, then what good are we?" said William Owen, a superdelegate and DNC member from Tennessee who has been contacting fellow DNC members ahead of the Chicago gathering, especially in the South. In Chicago, this will not be rubber-stamped. Bob Mulholland, a superdelegate and DNC member from California who has been in talks with superdelegates in the West, said, "The more DNC members realize that this so-called reform is to throw them off the floor, I think there will be a lot of complaints in Chicago." Representative Jerry Connolly, who accused Perez of flinching in the face of criticism of the superdelegate process, called the proposal a craven capitulation to what Perez describes as a perception of elitism. Connolly, like other opponents of the plan, argued that disenfranchising the elected leadership of the party would disconnect elected leaders from the party's presidential ticket, ultimately weakening its prospects in 2020. DNC officials were preparing to undertake an outreach effort ahead of the gathering in Chicago to win support for the recommendation. Jim Roosevelt, co-chairman of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, acknowledged the DNC will be asking superdelegates to vote against their self-interest, but he said the committee will impress on delegates that the proposal is the best plan to deal with the perception about elites influencing the nomination. Now, according to individuals who are following this issue more closely, it does seem as though this effort will ultimately fail. However, I do want to get to some of the quotes here because I think they really speak to just how out of touch they are. So it was Jerry Connolly, representative, who states that this proposal is, quote, a craven capitulation to what Perez describes as a perception of elitism. There's no perception of elitism, it's just elitism. Superdelegates have a vote that is 10,000 times more powerful than our votes. If that's not elitism, then I don't know what is. And the problem with superdelegates is that they have enough power to where if they disagree with the choice we make, well, they currently have the power to undermine the will of voters. So individuals in this article, they talk about them being disenfranchised. Connolly said that this is them disenfranchising the elected leadership of the party. So if you're not able to disenfranchise voters, that's you being disenfranchised. I mean, imagine if all of a sudden Russia democratized and there was a law passed saying that Vladimir Putin's goons could no longer stuff the ballot boxes. If he were pissed off about that and threw a temper tantrum at that new law, we'd all laugh at him and make fun of him. But yet, Democrats are crying about them not being able to undermine the will of voters, and there's not universal condemnation. There's not people in the mainstream media making fun of them and calling them out. I mean, they're acting like rebellious teenagers or worse, petulant children, really, because their ability to influence the outcome of elections in a brazenly undemocratic way will be reduced. Now, again, this plan is already a compromise because they're not eliminating superdelegates. They need to be gone. Republicans don't have superdelegates. Why does a party named the Democratic Party with democracy in their name have superdelegates? It's inherently undemocratic, and yet they're the ones who feel as though they've been wronged. You haven't been wronged. I mean, think back to 2016. Not to relitigate 2016 because I'm tired of doing that, but look at New Hampshire. Bernie Sanders beat Hillary Clinton by, what, a 22-point margin? Well, at the end of the day, when you take into account pledged and superdelegates, she still got more delegates because more superdelegates from New Hampshire endorsed her, and they agreed to vote for her instead of Bernie Sanders. What kind of bullshit is that? So you do have a vote. They're acting as if their vote is being taken away. But if superdelegates didn't exist, if you weren't a superdelegate, you'd still have one vote. One person, one vote. You'd have the same amount of power as us. But that's the thing. They don't want the same amount of power that we have because they are elites. They think that they're better than us. They think that they know better than us. So if we nominate someone who they don't like, who they don't think is electable, well, they want the power to undermine our will. That's exactly what this is about. And they are openly flaunting it. They're not even anonymously telling us how outraged they are. They're openly saying someone who is elected, a representative in Congress, is saying they're disenfranchising us. I mean, it's just outrageous. You're not disenfranchised if you no longer have the ability to disenfranchise voters. In fact, if you have the ability to disenfranchise voters, or even tip the scales against what they want even just a little bit, you're the bad guy. It's not the other way around. Trying to make the DNC and the Democratic Party more equitable and more open to average voters, that's something that will behoove you. You want to win, don't you? This will make you more electable. This will make the party more marketable because currently you guys rigged the primary in 2016. You fucked us all over. And the fact that you haven't done dramatic reforms, the fact that Tom Perez didn't get in there and clean house is outrageous in and of itself. Now, he kind of cleaned house. He purged progressives and replaced them with establishment shills. But nonetheless, this is a step in the right direction. And it doesn't go far enough. But they're still angry at the prospect of them moving towards them being more democratic. I don't know what to say. These people, they have to lose their jobs. They're so painfully out of touch. They are incapable of representing the public. They don't represent us through the party itself as elected members of Congress, nor do they represent us through the DNC. They just have to lose their jobs.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.